little bit before 1906, before any of us were born, there was a group of individuals who decided they wanted to establish a steel plant on the southern end of Lake Michigan. And they chose the area that would become Gary, Indiana. And the founders of U.S. Steel decided that because of the assets that were there, at that time rail, the water, and the location in proximity to the city of Chicago, but in the population center of the United States, that it would be a great location for a steel plant. And as they had predicted, it was. In fact, it was such a great location that in 1920, Gary, Indiana was nicknamed the Magic City because of its exponential growth. And so as the city grew during the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, it not only became known for the industry associated with the manufacture of steel, it became known for its world-class park system, its tremendous architecture, and as one of the best school systems in the country. In fact, teachers from all around flocked to Gary because they paid more than most school systems in all of the United States. So let's fast forward to the 70s and the 80s. As we saw the decline of steel, and as we saw the decline of manufacturing in general, what happened? We saw a drastic reduction in population, just as you had seen a meteoric increase. You saw the population of Gary plummet. And with that came unemployment. With that came crime. With that came the demise of the educational system. You saw abandonment, vacancy. And then to add insult to injury, our governor a few years ago got the bright idea that property taxes should be capped. And with those property tax caps, not only should it be done through a statute, but it should be done as a part of the Indiana Constitution. And so when we took office on January 1st, 2012, it was the first day that the property tax caps became active without any other type of governmental relief. And what that meant for Gary, in addition to all of the items that impacted all legacy cities, we lost over 50% of our budget. And so you're probably thinking there, sitting there thinking, now I think I heard somewhere that she ran 3 times to get this job. I did. And so what do you do? What do you do when you are faced with really what is the challenge of my professional life? Well, you have to look at the resources that are available. And that's really what this discussion about partnership is all about. But even before looking at the partnerships, you look at those resources that are inherent in the land. For us, it's our transportation resources. The same transportation resources, and even more of them, that led the U.S. Steel team to establish a plant, which is incidentally still the flagship plant for U.S. Steel in the city of Gary. Transportation assets like the railways, 3 Class 1 railways in our case. Transportation assets like 4 interstate highways an underdeveloped airport, and yes, the lakefront, and the proximity to the third largest city in the United States. And so you build on those assets. But you also have to understand that in order to do the work that has to be done in the city of Gary, in order to do the takedown, to use WWF vernacular, you need a team of people with special skills. So that's what we first set out to do. Even before taking office in January, we said we need to get a team of individuals, those who went to the best schools in the country, those who have had jobs that are difficult before, those who aren't afraid to work hard, those who don't understand 9 to 5. That's who we want. And we want them to have some type of nexus to Gary, Indiana. And so we were able to encourage people to leave high-paying jobs in great cities with wonderful entertainment. But there was a common theme. They were willing to come home. 2 of them are here today. Our Director of Communications, Chelsea Whittington, and B.R. Lane, who heads up our airport. Please join me in thanking them. And so, as with any new administration, even though you got all this information during the transition period, we get in and find things are just a tad worse than we had anticipated. And that's where our partnerships really come in. And so we all know that one of the best things we can do, whether you're in government or in business or in any arena, is to ask for help. And we did. We started with the academic community. And one of the first institutions to come to our rescue was the University of Chicago. And some of those students who are part of the Gary Practicum are here today, and I just want to thank them. And let me tell you, I can assure you that the Gary Practicum is by no means a gut. And those of you who remember what a gut looked like when you were in college or in graduate school, the Harris School of Public Policy has been a tremendous partner. It was at the behest of Mayor Richard Daley, who has been a friend and mentor. And I cannot tell you how valuable their work, whether you're looking at the local data survey, them bringing that together, Gary, whether you look at the civic engagement that they have stirred up, whether you look at really inspiring us to look at how we leverage our other assets like our airport, or whether you look at the development of the 5x5x5 program, that made a difference. Indiana University, another partner, a partner that had a medical school and a partner that shared our recognition that it was a travesty that in all of Northwest Indiana, there was not one trauma center. And so if you got into an accident on Interstate 65 in Gary, you had to be flown to Chicago or Indianapolis or South Bend. And everybody knows that during that golden hour, when you're traveling on that helicopter, it could mean the difference between life or death. And so we're working now on a feasibility study with Indiana University to determine if, in fact, there should be a trauma center. And we know there should be, but if it should be in Gary, Indiana, and of course, I know it should be. But we believe that the feasibility study will bear that out and will allow us to create in partnership with Indiana University not only a trauma center, but a teaching hospital that will accompany that medical school that they have there. So those are two of the academic partnerships. And there have been many others who have come for brief stints. Northwestern University, Ivy Tech Community College is a tremendous partner. And in fact, IU and Ivy Tech have joined together to develop a building, a $45 million building that had previously been withheld by the legislature because they did not believe that the city of Gary was willing to invest in the area around this proposed building. And so I went to the chair of the finance committee in the Senate, and I said that you put your money where your mouth is, I'll put mine where my mouth is. And while he had 45 million, I only had a couple of million. But for us, that was just like the widow's mite. And when he saw that, he authorized that building, and I'm pleased to say in September, we're going to break ground on that building. Other partnerships have included corporate partners, and they have been a key part of our efforts to rebuild. We had an airport for over 50 years, had seen fits and starts. You ought to have another airline at the airport. You ought to do cargo at the airport. You ought to do this at the airport. You ought to do that. Well, you know what? I've had my hand in a lot of areas. In fact, I've been a professional vagabond. But one of the things I knew I didn't know was how to run an airport. So let's call some experts in. Experts like Avco Avports, experts like Guggenheim, like Loop Capital, like Mike Mullen from Centerpoint Properties, someone who had developed airports, but also who had developed around airports. And so in 2013, the city of Gary had the only successful public-private partnership on an airport and its footprint. And not only was that a successful joint venture, it was a venture that guaranteed $100 million over the course of 40 years, $25 million in the first 3 years, and local employment and local business opportunity guarantees were part and parcel of that agreement. And so the corporate community has been a vital part of our partnerships. Our local utility company, and who we incidentally owed when we got into office, came on as a partner because we sat down with them and we articulated our vision and said, we want to revitalize our economic development corporation. We need your help. We want you to put a person here, but we also want you to work with us to get that done. Now, in addition to those partners, citizens have been vital partners in our community, as well as state, local, and federal government. We were fortunate enough to be named a SC2 city. And it wasn't just we're the federal government and we're here to help, but it was people rolling up their sleeves and saying to us, what is your vision? How can we help you? But more importantly, how can we remove the red tape that you typically see in federal and state government? And yes, even though there is a philosophical divide politically, our state government has been a partner with the city of Gary. And I think we ought to write a book on that alone. What are some of the common themes when you look at these partnerships? The first is you really do have to articulate to people what you need and how you need it, and then ask them if they can do it. And if they can't, then you say, okay, and be willing to walk away. And if they say, we can do this, but we can't do it in the way that you discussed it, sit down and work out a plan that works for both of you. We saw this with our foundation partners. They wanted to fund certain things. Data was at the top of their list. And while initially we weren't as interested in data, we understood and began to use that data to drive our decisions, and they were willing to fund that. And so that became an important part of our plan. you also have to understand that everyone who says they want to help may not necessarily be helpful. And so you have to tell them, okay, thanks, but no thanks. You have to do it in a very mayoral, diplomatic way. The last thing is that I've learned that you really do have to manage disappointment. Every week, I have 15 minutes with the mayor. Come in, tell me your best idea. And there have been some doozies. There have been some good ideas too. But whether it's an idea that we implement or not, citizens have to feel that they are in fact being heard and that their ideas are valuable. And that's where I really want to close. A lot of times people ask me, what is the greatest challenge you have as mayor of the city of Gary? In fact, they lead into that question with the statement, whoo, you have a hard job, as if I don't know. And, you know, is it getting rid of the structural deficit? Absolutely not, although that's hard. Is it finding jobs or attracting business? Is it rebuilding infrastructure like so many of us have and need to do? It's none of those things. Although those are formidable challenges, I will certainly grant you that. I'll tell you what our single most challenge is. And it's not just in Gary, but it's in cities across the country, it's in states, it's in the federal government. It's rebuilding hope. People have become so jaded. They've become so just disillusioned. And it's not because of anything that they've done, but it's because they've seen government and government officials make promises and not keep them. The other day, a lady, actually yesterday, a lady came to me and asked, she said, I need to know about this fee for the fire hydrants. And the water company said it was the city's fault, and I just want to know if that's the truth. And I said, you know, I think I know the answer, but I'm not 100% sure. Give me your name and number, and I'll get back to you. And she was stunned. She said, you mean you're going to call me back? I said, yes, ma'am. I don't know the answer. I could lie and tell you something that's not right, but I want to give you the right answer. That ought to be the norm. That ought to be the rule. That's not the exception. I am humbled and honored to serve as the mayor of my hometown. I often say to people, it's a labor of love. Sometimes more labor than love, but a labor of love just the same. And I know that the mayors who have spoken today and so many other mayors across the state, or United States, share that same sentiment. And it is through our service and through the labors and the love that we bring to that service that we will, in fact, restore hope in government. Thank you so much.